Donald Trump continues to wage his unprecedented war on the First Amendment, free speech, and free press, specifically by way of his FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. And it's so bad that Carr is being called out, not just by Fox News hosts, but by MAGA Republican senators on Fox News who recognize this, however reluctantly, for what it is. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, we continue to track Trump's war on free speech, which is objectively far worse than any war on free speech in modern American history, certainly by the Democratic Party. There's a group called FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. They're a libertarian group. They've gone after Democratic administrations like the Obama and Biden administrations, suing them in court, defending complaints against them in court. They've gone after college universities for being censoriously woke. So they've done things that conservatives and MAGA love. And yet, FIRE is pretty even-handed, and they'll call out right-wing censorship as well. In April of last year, one of the big wigs at FIRE was interviewed by a friend of the show, Mehdi Hassan, and he said in April of last year, merely 3 months after Trump got back into power, that despite their criticisms of the left and college universities and the Obama and Biden administrations, that the Trump administration's war on free speech was unprecedented, they said, quote, in scope, scale, and severity. So 3 months into the Trump administration, this libertarian free speech group is like, yeah, Trump is worse than any Democrat. And that was April of last year. And we're rapidly approaching a year later, and it's only gotten worse. So let's dive into what happened, and then I'll show you how Fox News host Jackie Heinrich and MAGA Republican Senator, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin reacted to it as well. As Mediaite reports, FCC chairs fires warning shot at broadcasters amid barrage of Trump administration complaints about Iran coverage. And this is Brendan Carr right there. He's that asshole standing next to the other asshole who happens to be president of the United States. Federal Communications Commission Chair Brendan Carr threatened pulling the licenses of broadcasters pushing, quote, fake news on Saturday following Donald Trump and others complaining about media coverage of the current war with Iran. In a Saturday X post, Carr, a vocal critic of the media, included a Truth Social message from Trump complaining about, quote, misleading coverage on Iran. We'll look at Carr's tweet in just a second. Trump accused the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal of wanting the U.S. to, quote, lose the war. And then this is the predicate for what Carr had to say. Again, we'll get into what he said specifically in just a second. As a matter of fact, let's go ahead. Other administration officials have also lobbed complaints at the media over coverage of the war, including Pete Hegseth. Remember, Hegseth said famously in a press conference, you guys are only talking about the American casualties, the 13 service members that Trump and Hegseth have gotten killed, and the 160 Iranian schoolgirls that Trump and Hegseth vaporized. You're only talking about that to, quote, make Trump look bad, which is disgusting and despicable. Fox News relentlessly talked about the 13 service members that died under President Biden's command during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Were they obligated to just shut the fuck up and not talk about that? No, of course not, right? And I say that as somebody who supported President Biden in the withdrawal from Afghanistan. They had every right to talk about the service members who died under Biden's command. Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And when Trump gets 13 American service members killed, the American media has every right to talk about that nonstop. And if you don't like it, then never talk about bad things that happen under a Democratic administration. But again, they can't do that. They're hypocrites. And Brendan Carr is the ultimate hypocrite, as you're about to see. So Brendan Carr goes on Twitter and says, broadcasters that are running hoaxes and news distortions, also known as the fake news, have a chance now to correct course before their license renewals come up. The law is clear. Broadcasters must operate in the public interest, and they will lose their licenses if they do not. And frankly, changing course is in their own business interest, since trust in media has now fallen to an all-time low of just 9% and are ratings disasters. The American people have subsidized broadcasters to the tunes of billions of dollars by providing free access to the nation's airwaves. It's very important to bring trust back into media, which has earned itself the label of fake news. Again, that's his boss's label for it. When a political candidate is able to win a landslide election victory in the face of such hoaxes and distortions, there's something very wrong. It means the public has lost faith and confidence in the media, and we can't allow that to happen. Time for change. And remember, Brendan Carr is the guy who said publicly on Jimmy Kimmel, or to Jimmy Kimmel, we can either do this the easy way or the hard way, after Jimmy Kimmel made a joke about Trump following the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So again, he's very transparent and very mafioso. He said it on Benny Johnson's show. He got a lot of pushback, even from conservatives, to give them their credit. Ted Cruz called Brendan Carr out for this. So again, Carr just is objectively an unprincipled loser. And he's so egregious that even prominent MAGA senators like Ted Cruz, and as you're about to see, Ron Johnson, as you're about to see in just a second, they're even calling him out. Do you know how unprincipled you have to be for MAGA to go, yuck, calm down? So again, it's not a matter of opinion. There's no good faith defense of Brendan Carr. The left is right. The right is wrong. Carr is objectively terrible in all instances, in every circumstance. He's always losing on the merits, as you're about to see. Because, of course, people are pointing out, Brendan Carr says, should the government censor speech it doesn't like? Of course not. The FCC does not have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of the public interest, said Brendan Carr in 2019. And people are also calling him out for shit that he said under the Biden administration as well, when he was not the FCC chair, but he was just on the FCC. He didn't like the idea. Well, the Biden administration can't put their thumb on the scale. We have free speech in this country. But if it's a Republican, well, then of course, that's different because they get to play by different rules. So Keith Olbermann responded, said, go fuck yourself and the fascist you prostituted yourself, Baldy. Brendan Carr, again, totally unrepentant, responded with, still not interested in your Cartier jewelry. Nico Perino of Fire pointed out, what happened to this guy? Remember when MAGA used to be anti-war? Everybody remembers because it was only a year ago, dumbass. Again, Adam Kinzinger, former MAGA Republican congressman, says, or you could just go fuck yourself in the face instead. This is America. Friend of the show, Kyle Kalinske, says, shitting on the First Amendment this brazenly should get you immediately locked up. And again, just going on and on and on and on, people pointing out the hypocrisy of Brendan Carr. But Brendan Carr, of course, as I'm about to show, he's not a principled man. He doesn't care about hypocrisy because right now he's in power. And power is something that MAGA values collectively overall much more than principle. So even though you're like, Brendan, the debate, we always win, you always lose because we're right and you're wrong and you're a hypocrite and we're not. What do you think about that? And he's like, that's true. I do always lose the debate. And yes, I am a hypocrite and you're not, but I have the power and you don't. And that's really, at the end, all that matters. It's all that matters to Brendan Carr is power. And he's got it for now. So let's go to, again, it being so bad that even Jackie Heinrich of Fox News and MAGA Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin had to weigh in. Take a look.
And finally, because we are almost out of time, sir, I just want to get your thoughts on the FCC chairman. He has been heavily criticizing broadcast news organizations for their war coverage, threatening not to renew their broadcast licenses, though. And the critics jumped on a post that he made a few years ago, sort of countering himself and saying the FCC does not have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of public interest. Obviously, there is a lot of criticism on the very news reporting that the administration is unhappy with. But do you think it's the role of the government to police that kind of coverage, from where they sit?
Yeah, I'm a big supporter of the First Amendment. I do not like the heavy hand of government, no matter who's wielding it. So, no, I'd rather the federal government stay out of the private sector as much as possible. And really, the federal government's role is to protect our freedoms, protect our constitutional rights.
So when you lose Ron Johnson and Ted Cruz, I mean, again, I just imagine what it takes to get these MAGA Republican lawmakers to criticize the Trump administration. Okay. Let's continue. Ted Lieu, Democratic congressman, says, Dear Brendan Carr, if you implement your flagrantly anti-First Amendment actions, you'll be sued and you'll lose. And legal discovery will be awesome because the American people can find out what the administration keeps hiding. Take your fascist shit and shove it. Governor Gavin Newsom responding, if Trump doesn't like your coverage of his war, his FCC will pull your broadcast license. This is flagrantly unconstitutional. Democratic Senator Chris Murphy says this is the federal government telling news stations to provide favorable coverage of the war or their licenses will be pulled. A truly extraordinary moment. We aren't on the verge of a totalitarian takeover. We are in the middle of it. Act like it. Democratic Senator Brian Schatz says this is a clear directive to provide positive war coverage or else licenses may not be renewed. This is worse than the comedian stuff and by a lot. And again, he's referring to Jimmy Kimmel. The stakes here are much higher. He's not talking about late night shows. He's talking about how a war is covered. Fox News has argued in court multiple times over the years that it's their constitutional right to be able to lie to their viewers. And they won, says Al Smizzle. Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren says Constitutional Law 101, it's illegal for the government to censor free speech it doesn't like just doesn't like about Trump's Iran war. This threat is straight out of the authoritarian playbook. Adam Kinzinger, again, former MAGA Republican congressman, says, I knew Brendan Carr from my time in the Energy and Commerce Committee. He has absolutely drank fascist juice since those days. This is unacceptable and un-American. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona says that when our nation is at war, it is critical that the press is free to report without government interference. It's literally in the Constitution. This is overreach by the FCC because this administration doesn't like the microscope and doesn't want to be held accountable. Midas Touch says Brendan Carr is threatening the media to cover the war the way the Trump regime wants. It's one of the most anti-American messages ever posted by a government official. The truth is, this war has been a failure of historic proportions. They don't want Americans to know that, but we will never stop covering it honestly and with a critical lens. That's something the serious deserves. Micah Irfan, a friend of the show, responds with a good "this you," of course, throwing Brendan Carr's own words back in his face. Former Republican Congressman Justin Amash says, "Cover the Iran wars the Trump administration likes, or you lose your broadcast license. They unlawfully go to war, and then they threaten to unlawfully abridge the freedom of speech and of the press." Friend of the show, Mehdi Hassan, says, "Brendan, Trump didn't win a landslide victory in 2024. You yourself are pushing fake news here." And that's actually worth pointing out that, of course, Brendan Carr, as most MAGA politicians do, just lied his ass off. When a political candidate is able to win a landslide election victory, he didn't win a landslide election victory. He didn't even win a popular vote majority. He only won a plurality. And again, just the criticism that he's getting from right and left. Rick Wilson, Never Trump Republican, says, "When the shoe is on the other foot, Carr and the other toadies will be the first to scream about press freedom." Sam Stein of the Bulwark says the state doesn't like the war coverage, threatens the license of broadcasters. And again, you get the gist. This is incredibly important how Ben Stiller, actor Ben Stiller, Meet the Fockers, Meet the Parents, Tropic Thunder, that Ben Stiller, calling this out as well. So the reason this is important is because Brendan Carr, the reason he's doing this is because he believes that there will be no consequences. He believes that the threat alone will be enough to chill action, and there's evidence to suggest that that's the case. We've seen the media bend itself to be in the shape that Trump wants, or at least go in that direction. CBS, CNN at times, certainly ABC and others as well. The lawsuits they've settled with Trump, the capitulation they have done in order to have their corporate mergers approved by the Trump FCC. So let's be very clear. The FCC is not impotent here. They do have power in very certain respects, which is why Brendan Carr is proceeding with this, despite the rank hypocrisy, despite the bipartisan criticism. He knows for now, at least in certain instances, he truly does have leverage. Now, I want to read FIRE's response, and then I want to show you how I responded to this. FIRE, again, the libertarian group that's gone after right-wing targets, like targets that the right wing prefers all the time. They're calling this out. Carr's authoritarian warning that networks risk their broadcasting licenses for Iran war reporting that the government doesn't like is outrageous. When the government demands the press become a state mouthpiece under the threat of punishment, something has gone very wrong. In 2019, Carr said, quote, "Should the government censor speech it doesn't like? Of course not. The FCC doesn't have a roving mandate to police speech in the name of the public interest." But today, Carr cites the public interest to blatantly threaten news outlets because the president doesn't like their reporting. Again and again, Carr's tenure as FCC chairman has been marked by his shameless willingness to bully and threaten our free press. But even by Carr's standards, today's hypocrisy is shocking and dangerous. The American people demand uncensored news about the men and women serving in our armed forces. Our right to a free press is one of the core American freedoms those in uniform have sworn to support and defend. It's long past time for our government officials to remember their very oaths to uphold the Constitution, starting with the First Amendment. So again, they are right to call this out. Now, I will point out my response, and I've been sparring a bit with a friend of mine and friend of the show, my former podcast co-host Hutch, about this. The gist is because I've done a lot of commenting on this over the past 24 hours. I've ran my mouth a lot. One of the posts I made was the next Democratic president should fire Carr on day one and use every precedent he's established against viable right-wing media targets. MAGA politicians only stand power, not principle, and the only possible way to deter them is if they know you'll do to them what they do to you. I want to see what else I put here. This is Hutch and I going back and forth. I want to show another post that I made a little earlier. Let's see here. I'll keep going. When people said, "What happened to this guy?" I said, "Well, he got power and abandoned his professed principles because he's morally inferior, you see, to any of his Democratic predecessors," which, of course, is just objectively true. Let's see here. I just want to make sure you get the full scope of my opinion on this. I guess I can't find the other post. But anyway, here's the point. The reason that Carr does this is because he thinks he can get away with it. He believes that it will work. It will be effective, at least in the short term. And he does not fear that there will be consequences if and when Democrats get back into power. And he's actually right to assume that. Like, it's not unjustified for him to believe that it will work in certain instances in the short term and that Democrats won't respond in anything approaching kind if the shoe's on the other foot. I wanted you to remember, let's just use Fox News as an example. Now, Fox News is interesting because Fox, the corporation, is not under the purview of the FCC, but Fox has affiliates and a robust radio network that is under the purview that the FCC can reach out and touch. I want you to remember that during the Biden administration, there was the Dominion Fox lawsuit, and we learned from the discovery. Remember, it was a shocking revelation, forcing Fox to ultimately settle in the biggest defamation settlement in American history, $787 million, because they knowingly signal boosted Trump's defamatory lies about Dominion and that Biden stole the 2020 election, when in fact Biden just kicked Trump's ass in a free and fair election. An FCC chairman under President Clinton publicly said during the discovery process, when all this came out, like, dude, the Biden FCC should at least launch a probe or an inquiry or raise a complaint. There's at least the predicate to do that. Maybe nothing will come of it, but they do have sufficient grounds to probe this, given that there's part of Fox within their purview. And we just saw that they likely violated FCC regulations and guidelines and things of that nature. But the Biden FCC really didn't do anything. There was an independent complaint brought to the FCC about a Fox affiliate. But at the end of the day, the Biden FCC, because they were very hands-off compared to the Trump FCC, shelved it. They canceled the probe. They said, you know what? We don't want to abridge or hurt First Amendment. We don't even want to get close. So we're dismissing this complaint, and we're dismissing other complaints against other networks. When Brendan Carr got back into power, he resurrected the complaints that the Biden FCC got rid of, except the one against Fox. So they brought back complaints against ABC and NBC and CBS and others, but not Fox. The Biden FCC was even-handed and said, be it left or right, we really don't want to reach out and press on the First Amendment, so we're going to dismiss them all. Carr's like, oh, no, we do want to do that against networks that this Republican president doesn't like, and we're going to protect Fox, but, we're going to hurt the others. Now, I believe that once a Democrat gets back into power, any viable right-wing target, and that means a right-wing media organization that is under the purview, under the regulatory power of the FCC, that the FCC can legitimately reach out and probe and inquire and investigate, and for a legitimate reason, like, again, Fox and the Dominion situation, right? They're not just going out and just, oh, you're right wing, so we're going to crush you. It's like, well, actually, we know that there is a predicate here to look into. I do think a Democratic FCC should do that. I think day one, they should fire Brendan Carr and do it in the meanest possible way, the meanest legal way possible. I think they should replace him with a liberal Rottweiler, and I think they're going to be like, listen, basically, we're going to give you a little taste of your own medicine. We're not going to go on a witch hunt. We're not going to target a right-wing media group just because they're a right-wing media group. But again, I'm using the Fox Dominion example. According to an ex-FCC chairman, there was at least the predicate. The Biden FCC was perfectly within its purview to at least start a probe into Fox over the Dominion situation. The days where we're just going to ignore that for the sake of, good faith and fair play, and, we don't want to touch those days are gone, because we need to show you that this is going to be a reciprocal thing. And if you want to just go back to the days where, yes, we could technically ding you for that, but we're not going to, because damn it, we're in good faith, then you will show us good faith. Because if not, then there is no good faith to show, and we're going to do to you what you did to us. And it needs to be that sort of proposition. I genuinely believe that. But that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments.